The morning started like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. Guard Thomas Bennet stood at his post near the East Wing corridor, his posture rigid and professional as always. He had been working at the palace for nearly 5 years, and in that time he had learned to blend into the background, becoming almost invisible to the royal family and their staff. That was the job. Stand still, observe everything, say nothing. Thomas was 28 years old, former soldier who had served in Afghanistan before taking this position. The palace job was supposed to be quieter, safer, and far less stressful than his military days. For the most part, it was. The biggest excitement usually came from tourists trying to sneak photos or the occasional lost delivery person wandering into restricted areas. But today would be different. The corridor was empty that morning, which was unusual. Normally, staff members rushed back and forth, carrying trays, documents, and various items needed for the day's activities. The silence felt heavy, almost oppressive. Thomas checked his watch. It was just past 9 o'clock. The family would be having breakfast in the private dining room. Most of the staff would be busy attending to morning duties. He heard the footsteps before he saw anyone. They were quick, almost frantic, echoing against the marble floors. Thomas straightened his posture instinctively, preparing to salute whoever was approaching. But something felt wrong about those footsteps. They were uneven, stumbling. Then he saw her. Princess Catherine appeared around the corner, her hand pressed against the wall for support. Her face was pale, almost gray, and there was a sheen of sweat on her forehead, despite the cool temperature of the palace. She wore a simple blue dress, but it hung loosely on her frame, and Thomas noticed immediately that she looked thinner than the last time he had seen her up close. For a moment, their eyes met. Thomas saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. It was not just physical pain. It was fear. Raw, genuine terror. Catherine took another step forward, but her legs seemed to give out beneath her. She crumpled, her body folding as she began to fall toward the hard marble floor. Training took over. Thomas broke protocol instantly, rushing forward to catch her before she hit the ground. He managed to get his arms under her just in time, supporting her weight as she collapsed against him. She was lighter than he expected, far too light for someone of her height, Your Royal Highness, he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. I have you. You are safe. Catherine's eyes fluttered open. Up close, Thomas could see the dark circles under them. The hollow look that spoke of weeks, maybe months, of poor sleep and stress. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. She was trying to tell him something. Please, she finally whispered, her voice hoarse and desperate. Do not call anyone yet, please. Thomas hesitated. Every protocol demanded that he immediately alert the palace medical staff, security, and senior personnel. A member of the royal family collapsing was a serious incident that required immediate action. But something in her eyes stopped him. She was not just asking. She was begging. Your Royal Highness, you need medical attention, he said gently, still supporting her weight. Let me at least help you to a chair, and then I must call someone. No, she said, with more strength this time. Her hand gripped his uniform jacket. You do not understand. They cannot know. Not yet. Not until I figure out what to do. Ance felt his confusion growing. Who could not know? The medical staff. The other royals? What was happening here that had the Princess of Wales so terrified? He made a quick decision. There was a small sitting room just a few doors down, rarely used and away from the main traffic areas. He could get her there, make sure she was stable, and then assess the situation properly. All right, he said quietly. But I am taking you somewhere more comfortable, and then you need to tell me what is going on, so I can help you properly. Relief flooded Catherine's face. She nodded weakly, and Thomas carefully helped her to her feet. She leaned heavily against him as they moved down the corridor. He could feel her trembling, her breathing shallow and rapid. Whatever was wrong with her, it was serious. They reached the sitting room, and Thomas used his security card to unlock the door. The room was small but comfortable, with 2 sofas and several armchairs arranged around a low table. Heavy curtains covered the windows, casting the space in soft shadows. He guided Catherine to the nearest sofa and helped her sit down. She immediately leaned back against the cushions, closing her eyes. Her breathing was still labored, and Thomas noticed a slight blue tinge to her lips. That was not a good sign. He had seen enough medical emergencies during his military service to know that something was very wrong. "I am going to get you some water," he said, moving toward a small cabinet where he knew refreshments were kept. "And then you are going to tell me what is happening? Because, Your Royal Highness, with all due respect, you look like you are about to faint again." He found a bottle of water and poured some into a glass, bringing it back to her. Catherine's hands shook as she took it from him, and she had to use both hands to steady the glass enough to drink. She took small sips, and gradually, some color began to return to her face. Thomas pulled one of the armchairs closer and sat down, maintaining a respectful distance but staying close enough to react if she collapsed again. He pulled out his radio, keeping it visible. "I should call the medical staff," he said firmly. "Whatever is happening, you need proper care." "Wait," Catherine said, setting the glass down on the table. She looked at him directly, and Thomas saw that fear again in her eyes. "What is your name?" "Thomas Bennett, Your Royal Highness. I have been with Palace Security for 5 years." She nodded slowly, as if processing this information and deciding whether she could trust him. "Thomas, what I am about to tell you could put both of us in danger. But I need someone to know. I need someone outside of the family, outside of the inner circle, to understand what is happening before it is too late." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. "Your Royal Highness, if you are in danger, then we definitely need to involve proper authorities." "It is not that simple," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The danger is not from outside the palace, Thomas. It is from within. And I am starting to believe that someone very close to the family is trying to kill me." The words hung in the air between them. Thomas stared at her, trying to process what he had just heard. Someone in the royal family was trying to kill the Princess of Wales? It sounded like something from a thriller novel, not reality. But looking at her face, seeing the genuine terror there, he knew she was not joking or delusional. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. "Start from the beginning." Catherine took a deep breath, wincing slightly as if even breathing caused her pain. "It started about 6 months ago. Small things at first. I would feel dizzy after meals, nauseous. I thought it was stress at first, or maybe something simple like an iron deficiency. But it kept getting worse." She paused, taking another sip of water. "I went to the palace doctors, of course. They ran tests. Everything came back normal, they said. They told me it was anxiety, stress, maybe the pressure of public life getting to me. They prescribed medications to help me sleep, to calm my nerves. But the medications made everything worse." Thomas leaned forward, listening intently. "Worse? How?" "The dizziness became more severe. I started having trouble remembering things. Simple things like conversations from the day before or where I had put items. My hands would shake. I would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I could not breathe, my heart racing so fast I thought it would explode." She looked down at her hands, which were still trembling slightly. "I told myself it was all in my head, that the doctors were right and I just needed to manage my stress better. But then I started noticing other things. Strange things." "What kind of things?" Thomas asked. Catherine's voice dropped even lower. "My tea would taste bitter sometimes when it never had before. I would find my medication bottles had been moved, even though I always kept them in the same place. And then there were the conversations I overheard, Thomas. Conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered a room. Looks exchanged between staff members that I was not supposed to see." She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to ward off a chill. 2 weeks ago, I got suspicious enough that I stopped taking my prescribed medications. And do you know what happened? I started feeling better. Not completely better, but the worst symptoms began to fade. That is when I knew something was wrong with those pills." Thomas felt his jaw tighten. "Did you confront the doctors?" "I tried," Catherine said. "But when I went to retrieve the medication bottles to have them independently tested, they were gone. Every single one of them. Someone had removed them from my private chambers. That is when I knew for certain." Someone is doing this deliberately, and they have enough access to my private spaces to cover their tracks." The implications were staggering. Thomas tried to think logically, to find an explanation that made sense. Could it be a staff member? Someone with a grudge? Catherine shook her head. The staff is thoroughly vetted. And besides, they would not have access to prescribe medications or coordinate with the palace doctors. No, Thomas. This is someone with power, someone with connections, someone who can make doctors write prescriptions and make evidence disappear. Have you told anyone else about your suspicions? Thomas asked. Prince William. Your family? Something flickered across Catherine's face. Pain and something else. Doubt. That is the problem, Thomas. I do not know who to trust anymore. William has been so busy lately, always traveling, always in meetings. When I tried to tell him I was feeling unwell, he just told me to rest more, to see the doctors. He trusts them completely. How do I tell him that I think someone close to us is poisoning me when I have no proof? She stood up slowly, steadying herself against the armrest. And it is not just about trust. If I make accusations without evidence, I could create a massive scandal. The monarchy is already under so much scrutiny. If word got out that I was making wild claims about being poisoned, they would say I was having a breakdown. They might even remove me from public duties, take me away from my children for psychiatric evaluation. Thomas understood the trap she was in. So what are you planning to do? I have been trying to gather evidence, Catherine said. I have been keeping notes, documenting when I feel ill and what I consumed beforehand. I managed to save one of my medication bottles before they all disappeared. I have it hidden in a safe place, but I need to get it tested by someone I can trust, someone outside the palace system. She turned to look at Thomas directly. And then this morning I think someone realized I stopped taking the medications. I found a new bottle on my bathroom counter, prescribed by a different doctor. The label said they were vitamins, but something felt wrong. I left them untouched and came downstairs, and that is when I started feeling dizzy again. I think they put something in my breakfast, Thomas. They are getting more aggressive. Thomas stood up as well, his mind racing. This was far beyond anything he had been trained for. Your Royal Highness, this is attempted murder. We need to involve the police, proper investigators. And tell them what? Catherine asked, a note of desperation in her voice. That I have a feeling someone is poisoning me, but I have no proof. That the palace doctors say I am fine, but I think they are lying. I would sound paranoid, unstable. And whoever is doing this would be warned. They would have time to destroy any remaining evidence. She walked to the window, pulling back the curtains slightly to look out at the palace grounds. I need help, Thomas. Real help. But it has to be done carefully, quietly. I need someone to get my medication tested, without anyone knowing. I need someone who can watch, who can observe the people around me, and help me figure out who is behind this. I need someone I can trust. She turned back to face him. I know I am asking too much. You are a guard, not an investigator. And I am putting you at risk just by telling you this. But you caught me when I fell, Thomas. You did not have to. You broke protocol to help me, and I saw genuine concern in your eyes. I am trusting my instincts here, and my instincts tell me that you are someone who will do the right thing, even when it is difficult. Thomas looked at this woman, the future queen, trembling and terrified in a room that should have been safe. Every logical part of his brain told him to escalate this immediately, to call in superior officers and let them handle it. But he also knew she was right about the risks. If they moved too quickly without evidence, whoever was behind this would disappear into the shadows, and Catherine would be labeled as unstable. He thought about his own sister, about how he would want someone to help her if she were in danger and could not trust anyone else. He thought about his oath to protect and serve, and he thought about the fear in Catherine's eyes. The fear that came from knowing someone was slowly killing you, and no one would believe you. All right, he said finally. I will help you. But we do this smart. We gather real evidence, and we involve the right authorities as soon as we have something concrete. And Your Royal Highness, you need to promise me that if your life is in immediate danger, protocol goes out the window, and we get you to safety first. Relief washed over Catherine's face again, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. "Thank you, Thomas. You have no idea what this means to me." "We need a plan," Thomas said, his mind already working through the logistics. "First, I need that medication bottle." "Where is it hidden?" "In my private study, behind a loose panel in the bookshelf," Catherine said. "But I cannot go get it now. There are too many people around, too many eyes watching." Thomas nodded. "I will figure out a way. I have a friend who works in forensic investigation, someone I served with in the military. He is discreet, and he owes me a favor. He can test the medication without official channels." He paused. "But we also need to keep you safe in the meantime. You cannot eat or drink anything that you have not prepared yourself or seen prepared from start to finish." "That is going to be difficult without raising suspicion," Catherine said. "I know, we will have to be creative." Thomas pulled out his phone. "I am going to give you my personal number. If you feel ill, if anything strange happens, you contact me immediately. I do not care what time it is or what I am doing. Your safety is the priority now." Catherine nodded, pulling out her own phone with shaking hands to save his contact information. As she did, Thomas noticed something that made his heart sink. There were bruises on her wrists, faint but visible in the pattern of fingerprints. "Your Royal Highness," he said carefully, "those marks on your wrists. How did you get those?" Catherine quickly pulled down her sleeves, but not before Thomas saw her face flush with embarrassment. "It is nothing. I bruise easily now, because of whatever they have been giving me." "That is not an answer," Thomas said gently but firmly. "Did someone grab you?" There was a long pause. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice barely audible. "3 nights ago, I woke up to find someone standing in my bedroom. It was dark, and I could not see their face. They reached for something on my nightstand, probably my water glass. I startled them, and they grabbed my wrists to stop me from turning on the light. Then they ran." "Did you tell anyone?" Thomas asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "I told security there had been an intruder. They searched the entire wing and found nothing. They said I must have been dreaming, that the stress was causing nightmares. But I know what I saw, Thomas. Someone was in my room." Thomas felt anger building in his chest. This was even worse than he had thought. Whoever was behind this was getting bold, desperate perhaps. "From now on, I am going to make sure the guards on your corridor are ones I trust. People who will actually pay attention." Knock on the door made them both freeze. "Your Royal Highness?" a voice called from outside. "Are you in there? We have been looking everywhere for you." Catherine and Thomas exchanged a quick glance. She straightened her dress and ran a hand through her hair, composing herself. "I am here," she called back, her voice steady despite the fear Thomas could still see in her eyes. "I was just feeling a bit faint and needed to sit down for a moment." The door opened, and one of the senior staff members entered, looking concerned. "Your Royal Highness, you should have called for assistance. Let me help you back to your chambers." "I am fine now," Catherine said, standing up with only the slightest wobble. Guard Bennett was very helpful. "I just needed a moment of quiet." The staff member looked at Thomas with an expression that was hard to read. Suspicion. Curiosity. "Very good. Come along, Your Royal Highness. The prince is looking for you." As Catherine walked toward the door, she glanced back at Thomas one more time. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment an understanding passed between them. They were in this together now, bound by a secret that could get them both killed. After they left, Thomas stood alone in the sitting room, his mind reeling. He had come to work this morning, expecting a normal, quiet shift. Instead, he had stumbled into something dark and dangerous. Something that reached into the heart of one of the world's most famous families. He knew one thing for certain now. His life had just become very complicated, and the real work was only beginning. Thomas spent the rest of his shift in a state of heightened alertness, watching everyone who passed through the corridor with new eyes. Staff members, who had seemed harmless before now, appeared suspicious. Every conversation he overheard made him wonder if it was innocent or part of something darker. The weight of what Catherine had told him pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden, when his shift finally ended at 6 that evening, Thomas did not go straight home, as he normally would. Instead, he made his way to a small pub near the Thames, a place popular with former military personnel. He was meeting James Rothwell, his old army buddy, who now worked as a forensic toxicologist for a private laboratory. James was already there when Thomas arrived. Sitting in a corner booth with a pint of beer in front of him, he was a lean man with sharp features and eyes that seemed to analyze everything they saw. He had saved Thomas's life once during a difficult operation in Kandahar, and Thomas had returned the favor 6 months later. That kind of bond did not fade just because they had left the military. "You look terrible," James said as Thomas slid into the booth across from him. "What is going on?" "Your text said it was urgent." Thomas glanced around to make sure no one was close enough to overhear. "I need your help with something sensitive. Very sensitive. I cannot give you all the details, but I need you to test some medication for me. Specifically, I need to know if there is anything in it that should not be there." James raised an eyebrow. "This sounds like it could get me in trouble." "It could," Thomas admitted. "But it is also a matter of life and death. Someone I know is being poisoned, and I need proof before I can help them properly." "Someone at the palace?" James asked, his voice low. He knew where Thomas worked. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "I cannot say more than that." "Can you do it? Quietly? Without any official records?" James was silent for a long moment, studying Thomas's face. Finally, he sighed. "You know I can never say no to you, but this had better not blow back on me. I have a wife and kids now, Thomas. I cannot afford to lose my job, I understand. And I promise, if this goes bad, I will make sure you are protected. I will take full responsibility." "All right," James said. "Get me the medication. I will run a full analysis and have results for you within 48 hours. But Thomas, if this is what I think it is, if someone in the royal family is being poisoned, you need to be very careful. People who do this kind of thing do not stop just because they get discovered. They get more dangerous." Thomas nodded grimly. "I am starting to realize that." They talked for a while longer, catching up on each other's lives, and carefully avoiding any more discussion of the medication testing where other people might hear. When Thomas finally left the pub, it was dark outside, and the streets of London were busy with evening traffic and tourists taking photos of the illuminated bridges and buildings. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. "I need to see you tomorrow morning, early, before the household wakes. Can you be at the East Garden entrance at 5 a.m.? No signature, but Thomas knew it was from Catherine. He texted back, "I will be there." The next morning, Thomas arrived at the East Garden entrance at 10 minutes before 5. The palace grounds were shrouded in pre-dawn darkness, with only a few security lights breaking the gloom. The air was cold and damp, typical for London in autumn. Thomas wore his civilian clothes, not wanting to draw attention by showing up in uniform outside of his scheduled shift. Catherine appeared exactly at 5, wrapped in a long dark coat with a hood pulled up over her hair. She looked around nervously before approaching him. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I could not sleep. I kept thinking about everything, and I realized there are things I need to tell you. Things I should have mentioned yesterday." "What things?" Thomas asked, leading her to a bench partially hidden by overgrown bushes. They sat down, and he noticed she was carrying a small leather bag. "I have been keeping a journal," Catherine said, pulling a notebook from the bag. "Not a diary exactly, but notes. Everything strange that has happened over the past 6 months. Every time I felt ill, every odd conversation, every person who seemed suspicious. I wrote it all down because I was afraid I might forget things." The memory problems were getting so bad, she handed the notebook to Thomas. He opened it and began flipping through the pages. Her handwriting was neat at first, but became increasingly shaky and erratic as the entries progressed. He read phrases that made his blood run cold, severe dizziness after lunch. Soup tasted strange, found medication moved again. Someone was in my bathroom. I overheard conversation between staff member and unknown person. They stopped talking when they saw me. There is a pattern, Catherine continued. I did not see it at first, but looking back through my notes, I can see it clearly now. The worst symptoms always happen within a few hours of taking my prescribed medication, or after meals when certain staff members are on duty in the kitchen. Thomas looked up from the notebook. You are saying you have narrowed down who might be involved? Not exactly, Catherine said. But I've noticed something. There is one person who is always nearby when something happens. Not directly involved, but close enough to have orchestrated it. At first I thought it was coincidence, but it happens too often to be random chance. Who? Thomas asked. Catherine took a deep breath. Margaret Finch. She is the senior private. Secretary to the Prince and Princess of Wales. She has been with the royal household for nearly 20 years. Everyone trusts her completely. She has access to everything, Thomas. My schedule, my medical records, my private rooms. She coordinates with the palace doctors, manages the household staff, oversees security protocols. If anyone could orchestrate something like this without raising suspicion, it would be her. Thomas thought about this. Senior private secretaries were among the most trusted members of the royal household. They were the ones who made everything run smoothly, who protected the family's privacy and managed their public image. Accusing someone in that position would be extremely serious. What makes you suspect her specifically? Small things, Catherine said. The way she looks at me sometimes when she thinks I am not paying attention. There is something cold in her eyes, something calculating. And she is always pushing me to take my medications, reminding me about doctor's appointments, insisting that I need more rest and less public engagement. At first, I thought she was just being protective and doing her job. But now, I wonder if she is trying to isolate me, make me seem weak and unstable. She pulled out another item from her bag. It was the medication bottle she had mentioned the previous day. This is the one I managed to save. The label says it is for anxiety, prescribed by Dr. Hammond, one of the palace physicians. I have been taking these pills for 3 months, and they always made me feel worse, not better. That is what made me finally suspicious enough to stop taking them. Thomas took the bottle carefully, examining the label. It looked official, with all the proper information and warnings. I will get this to my contact today. He will test it and tell us exactly what is in it. There is something else, Catherine said. Her voice had dropped even lower, and Thomas had to lean closer to hear her. 2 days ago, I managed to access the household financial records. I know I should not have, but I needed to understand if there was a money trail. And Thomas, I found something strange. Large payments have been going out to an offshore account marked as security consulting fees. But when I asked about them discreetly, no one seemed to know what they were for. How large are we talking? Thomas asked. £50,000. Every month for the past year, that is £600,000 total. And the payments started just before I began feeling ill. Thomas felt a chill run through him. This was bigger than he had initially thought. If someone was being paid that much money, this was not just about hurting Catherine. This was professional. Did you trace where the payments were going? I tried, Catherine said. But the account information is encrypted and protected. I would need someone with serious hacking skills to break through that kind of security. And I cannot exactly hire a hacker without raising questions. Thomas thought for a moment. I might know someone. Another friend from my army days? But Catherine, if we start pulling on these threads, people are going to notice. We need to be prepared for what happens when they do. I know, she said. But what choice do I have? If I do nothing, I will die. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually. And it will look like an accident or natural causes. Everyone will say I was so stressed, so overwhelmed by royal life. They will say I had anxiety and depression. No one will question it. She stood up, wrapping her coat more tightly around herself. I have to go before someone notices I am gone. The morning staff will be arriving soon. But Thomas, there is one more thing you should know. Yesterday after I saw you, Prince William asked me who I had been talking to. Someone told him they saw me going into that sitting room with a guard. I told him I had felt faint, and you helped me, which is true. But he seemed suspicious. He asked if anything else was bothering me. What did you tell him? Thomas asked, standing as well. I said I was fine, just tired. But I could tell he did not believe me. He has been watching me more closely since then. Thomas, I love my husband, but I am starting to wonder if I can trust him. What if he knows something? What if he is involved? Her voice cracked on the last question. Thomas put a hand on her shoulder. A gesture that would have been completely inappropriate under normal circumstances, but felt necessary now. Do not jump to conclusions. He might just be worried about you. But until we know for certain who is behind this, you are right to be cautious with everyone. Catherine nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. I feel like I am going mad sometimes. Suspecting everyone, trusting no one. This is not the life I imagined when I married into this family. You're not going mad, Thomas said firmly. You are surviving, and we are going to figure this out. I promise you. After Catherine left, Thomas made his way off the palace grounds and headed straight for James's laboratory. It was still early, but he knew his friend often came in before the official start time to work on cases without interruption. He was right. James was in his office when Thomas arrived, already wearing his lab coat and examining something under a microscope. You have it? James asked without looking up. Thomas placed the medication bottle on the desk. Right here. And James, this is even more serious than I thought. If you find what I think you are going to find in there, we are going to need to move very carefully. James finally looked up, his expression grave. What exactly am I looking for? Anything that should not be an anxiety medication. Anything toxic. Anything that would cause the symptoms of poisoning while being subtle enough not to raise immediate red flags. James picked up the bottle, turning it over in his hands. This is a proper prescription bottle from a palace physician. If there is something wrong with what is inside, that means either the doctor is involved or someone switched the contents after it was prescribed. That is what I am afraid of, Thomas said. How soon can you have results? Give me until tomorrow evening. I will run every test I can think of. If there is anything unusual in these pills, I will find it. Thomas left the laboratory feeling both hopeful and terrified. They were finally taking concrete action, but he knew that gathering evidence was just the first step. The harder part would come when they had to decide what to do with that evidence and who they could trust with it. He returned to the palace for his regular shift at noon. Taking up his post in the same corridor where he had caught Catherine collapsing the day before. Everything looked normal on the surface. Staff members hurried about their duties. Other guards stood at their posts. Tourists gathered outside the gates to take photos. But Thomas saw it all differently now. He watched every face, listened to every conversation, looking for clues. Margaret Finch walked past him around 2 in the afternoon. She was a woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and a manner that radiated efficiency and control. She glanced at Thomas as she passed, and he met her gaze with a polite nod. Did her eyes linger on him for just a moment too long? Was there something calculating in that look? Or was he starting to see conspiracy everywhere? That evening, as Thomas was preparing to end his shift, A received another text from Catherine. Can you come to the library tonight at 10? I found something else. Something that changes everything. Thomas's heart sank. What now? But he texted back his confirmation. After his shift ended, he stayed on the palace grounds, finding a quiet place to wait until 10 o'clock. The time crawled by as his mind raced through possibilities. What could Catherine have found that was significant enough to risk another secret meeting? At exactly 10, Thomas made his way to the library. Using his security clearance to access areas that were normally restricted after hours. The palace library was a beautiful room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves holding thousands of volumes, some of them centuries old. Soft lighting cast shadows across the leather-bound books and antique furniture. Catherine was already there, standing by one of the tall windows that overlooked the gardens. She turned when she heard Thomas enter, and he was struck by how different she looked. There was a new intensity in her eyes, a kind of fierce determination that had not been there before. I broke into Margaret's office, she said without preamble. I know it was risky, but I had to know if my suspicions were right. And Thomas, I found something. Documents, emails, phone records. She has been communicating with someone outside the palace. Someone with connections to foreign intelligence services. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Foreign intelligence? This was spiraling into something far bigger than domestic poisoning. Are you sure about this? Catherine pulled out her phone and showed him photos she had taken of documents. Thomas scanned them quickly. They appeared to be encrypted email exchanges, but Catherine had managed to photograph what looked like decoded versions. The content was chilling. Discussions about weakening the royal family's public image, creating scandals, using health crises to destabilize the line of succession. "This is not just about killing me," Catherine said, her voice shaking slightly. "This is about destroying the monarchy from the inside. They want me to die in a way that looks natural. Then they want the scandal and investigation that would follow to tear the family apart. They are playing a long game, Thomas, and Margaret is just one piece of it." Thomas stared at the photos on the phone, his mind struggling to process the implications. If this was real, if Catherine had actually found evidence of an organized plot against the royal family, then they were dealing with something that went far beyond what he had imagined. This was not just murder. This was treason. "We need to take this to the authorities right now," he said. "This is too big for us to handle alone." "I know," Catherine said. "But who do we trust? If there are foreign intelligence services involved, they could have people everywhere. In the police, in security services, maybe even in MI5. We give this to the wrong person, and it disappears. Or worse, we disappear." Thomas rubbed his face, feeling the weight of exhaustion and stress. "All right, let me think. I have one more contact, someone who might be able to help us. But Catherine, after this, you need to tell Prince William everything. If there is a plot against the monarchy, he needs to know, regardless of whether he is involved or not." "I will," Catherine promised. "But first, we need to have ironclad proof. The medication analysis, these documents, everything tied together in a way that cannot be denied or explained away. Only then will anyone believe us." As they talked, neither of them noticed the small camera hidden in the corner of the library. Its lens focused directly on where they stood, and neither of them saw Margaret Finch sitting in her office 3 floors away, watching the live feed on her computer screen with a cold smile on her face. The trap was about to spring shut, and Thomas and Catherine had no idea how much danger they were truly in. The next morning arrived with unexpected rain. Heavy sheets of water beating against the palace windows and turning the London sky a dark gray. Thomas had barely slept, tossing and turning as his mind replayed everything Catherine had shown him the night before. Foreign intelligence services. Organized plots against the monarchy. It all seemed impossible, like something from a spy movie. Yet the evidence had been right there in those photographs. He arrived for his shift early, wanting to check on Catherine and make sure she had made it through the night safely. As he walked through the palace corridors, he noticed something unusual. There were more guards than normal, and several of them were faces he did not recognize. Private security contractors, by the look of them, rather than regular palace guards. Thomas felt a knot form in his stomach. Something was happening. He found one of his fellow guards, David Martinez, near the East Wing entrance. David had been at the palace for 8 years, and was one of the few people Thomas genuinely trusted. "What is going on?" Thomas asked quietly. "Why are there contractors here?" David glanced around before answering. "Word came down this morning. Someone broke into Margaret Finch's office last night. Files were accessed, documents photographed. They are treating it as a serious security breach. The contractors are here to sweep for bugs and check all the security systems." Thomas felt ice water flood his veins. Catherine's office break-in had been discovered. That meant Margaret knew someone was onto her. And if the library had cameras, which it almost certainly did, Margaret might already know that he and Catherine were working together. Have they identified who did it? Thomas asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Not yet," David said. "But they are reviewing security footage from all the cameras. It is only a matter of time." He paused, giving Thomas a strange look. "Why are you asking? Do you know something?" "No," Thomas lied. "Just curious. Security breaches are rare here." But David continued to look at him with suspicion, and Thomas realized he needed to find Catherine immediately. If they were reviewing footage, they would see her entering and leaving Margaret's office. They would see the two of them meeting in the library. The clock was ticking, They had very little time left to act. Thomas pulled out his phone and sent Catherine a carefully worded text. "We need to talk urgently. East Garden in 20 minutes. Come alone." The response came quickly. "I cannot. Being watched closely. William's suspicious. We'll try to slip away later." Thomas cursed under his breath. If Catherine could not move freely, then he was on his own for now. He needed to think quickly, to figure out what their options were, before the net closed around them completely. His phone rang. It was James, calling from the laboratory. Thomas stepped away from David and the other guards, moving to a more private area before answering. "Tell me you have results," he said without preamble. "I do," James said, his voice tense. "And Thomas, you were right to be worried. These pills contain arsenic. Not enough to kill someone immediately, but enough to cause severe illness over time. Chronic arsenic poisoning causes exactly the symptoms you described: dizziness, nausea, memory problems, tremors. If someone had kept taking these pills, they would have died within a few months. And it would have looked like organ failure or a heart attack." Thomas closed his eyes, feeling a wave of rage and vindication wash over him. They had proof now. Actual scientific proof that someone had been poisoning Catherine. "Can you document this? Create a formal report?" "Already done," James said. "But Thomas, there is more. I found traces of something else in one of the pills. A sedative, but not the kind normally prescribed for anxiety. This is the kind of thing used to make someone confused, disoriented. They were not just trying to kill her. They were trying to make her seem mentally unstable first. That makes sense?" Thomas said grimly. "If she started acting erratically, if she seemed paranoid or confused, no one would believe her when she tried to tell them she was being poisoned." "Exactly," James agreed. "Thomas, whoever did this, knew what they were doing. This is sophisticated, professional. You need to take this to the authorities right now." "I will," Thomas promised. "Send me the report electronically and then destroy any physical copies. If what I am thinking is true, you might be in danger just for having done this analysis."
Oh.
There was a pause on the other end. "Are you serious?" "Very serious. These people have already tried to kill a member of the royal family. They will not hesitate to eliminate a forensic toxicologist who has evidence against them. Be careful, James. Watch your back." After hanging up, Thomas stood in the corridor trying to decide his next move. He had the proof of poisoning now. But without Catherine's testimony and the documents she had found in Margaret's office, it was still not enough. They needed to put all the pieces together and present them to someone who had the power and integrity to act on them. Then his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Guard Bennett. This is Margaret Finch. I need to speak with you immediately." "My office." "Come alone." Thomas stared at the message, his heart pounding. This was it. Margaret knew. The question was, what did she plan to do about it? And more importantly, should he go? Walking into her office could be walking into a trap. But avoiding the meeting would only confirm her suspicions and give her time to act against him. He made a decision. He would go, but he would not go unprepared. Thomas quickly recorded a voice memo on his phone, explaining everything he knew. Everything Catherine had told him, and the results of the medication analysis. He sent the file to his personal email and to a secure cloud storage account. If something happened to him, at least the information would not be lost. Then he texted David Martinez, "If you do not hear from me in 1 hour, check my phone records and last known location. Something is wrong." David's response was immediate. "What are you talking about? What is going on?" "Just do it," Thomas typed back. "Please. I will explain later if I can." With that preparation done, Thomas made his way to Margaret Finch's office. The door was slightly ajar when he arrived, and he could see her sitting behind her desk, looking calm and composed. She smiled when she saw him and gestured for him to enter. "Guard Bennett," she said pleasantly. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please close the door and have a seat." Thomas did as instructed, though every instinct screamed at him to run. The office was large and well-appointed. Expensive furniture and walls covered in photographs of Margaret with various members of the royal family over the years. She had served them for 2 decades, had been present at major events, had been trusted with their most intimate secrets. "I imagine you know why I asked you here," Margaret said, still smiling that cold smile. "I can guess," Thomas replied, keeping his voice steady. "You know that Princess Catherine has been confiding in me." "Oh, it is more than that," Margaret said. She opened a laptop on her desk and turned it so Thomas could see the screen. It showed security footage from the library the previous night, showing him and Catherine looking at her phone, clearly discussing something serious. "You have been helping her investigate what she thinks is a conspiracy against her." "How noble. How foolish." Thomas said nothing, waiting to see what she would reveal. Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You are a good soldier, Thomas. I looked into your background after you caught my attention. Exemplary military record. Brave, loyal. Exactly. The kind of person someone like Catherine would turn to when she felt threatened. But you have gotten yourself involved in something you do not understand." "I understand that you have been poisoning the Princess of Wales," Thomas said flatly. "I have proof. The medication you arranged to have prescribed to her contains arsenic and sedatives. That is attempted murder." Margaret did not even flinch. "Is that what you think this is about?" "Simple murder." She laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You really do not see the bigger picture, do you?" "Then explain it to me," Thomas challenged. Margaret stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked gardens. "The monarchy is a relic, Thomas. An outdated institution that consumes enormous resources and wields influence it has not earned. For decades, people like me have worked within the system, watching the waste, the privilege, the casual destruction of lives for the sake of maintaining appearances. We have waited for the right moment, the right opportunity to expose it all." "So you were working with foreign intelligence to destroy it?" Thomas said. "Catherine found your communications." "Catherine found what I wanted her to find," Margaret corrected. "Those documents were bait, Thomas. I needed to know how far she would go, who she would trust, and she led me straight to you." She turned back to face him. "But you are right about one thing. There are powerful people outside this country who would benefit greatly from the destabilization of the British monarchy, and they are paying very well for my assistance." "You are a traitor," Thomas said. "I am a realist," Margaret countered. "The world is changing, Thomas. Old powers are falling, new ones rising. I am simply positioning myself on the right side of history." And Catherine was the perfect target. Beloved by the public, seen as the future of the monarchy, her death will create the exact kind of crisis needed to begin the process of dismantling this entire system. Thomas felt sick. "You will never get away with this. The evidence is already out there." "People know what you have done, do they?" Margaret asked. "Let me guess. You had the medication analyzed by a friend, someone discreet, someone you trusted, and you have been sending information to your personal accounts, thinking you were being clever." She smiled at his expression. "Thomas, I have been monitoring your communications since the moment Catherine first spoke to you in that corridor. I know about James Rothwell at the forensic lab. I know about every text, every call, every email you have sent. And all of that evidence you think you have been gathering? It is going to disappear, along with anyone who has seen it." Thomas lunged forward, but before he could reach her, the door burst open and two of the private security contractors entered, grabbing his arms and forcing him back into the chair. They were large men, professional, and Thomas knew he could not fight them both. "What are you going to do?" he demanded. "Kill me too? Kill you?" "No," Margaret said. "That would raise too many questions. Instead, you are going to be discovered attempting to harm Princess Catherine. A delusional guard who became obsessed with her, who tried to poison her to create a scenario where he could play the hero. All the evidence will point to you, Thomas. The medication with your fingerprints on it. Communications showing your unhealthy fixation. Witness statements from staff members who saw you acting strangely around her." "No one will believe that," Thomas said. "They will when they find Catherine's body and you standing over it," Margaret replied calmly. "Which is what is going to happen in about 30 minutes. You are going to be drugged, armed with a weapon, and placed in her private chambers. When she is found dead and you are discovered there, confused and disoriented, the narrative will be complete. A tragic incident, a mentally unstable guard, and the beginning of the end for this family. Thomas struggled against the men holding him, but they were too strong. One of them produced a syringe, and Thomas felt a sharp sting in his neck. Almost immediately, his vision began to blur, and his muscles went slack. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Margaret's cold smile and her voice saying, "Nothing personal, Guard Bennett. You were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time." When Thomas woke up, his head felt like it was filled with cotton, and his limbs were heavy and unresponsive. He was lying on something soft, a bed. He tried to move, but his body would not cooperate properly. Slowly, his vision cleared, and he realized where he was. He was in Catherine's bedroom. The room was dimly lit, but he could make out the elegant furniture, the photos on the nightstand, the royal crest on the wall, and there, sitting in a chair near the window, was Catherine herself. She was not moving. Her head was slumped forward, and Thomas could not tell if she was breathing. Panic gave him enough strength to push himself into a sitting position. His hand touched something cold and metal on the bed beside him, a knife. They had placed a knife in his hand. "Catherine," he tried to call out, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. "Catherine, wake up." The door to the bedroom suddenly burst open, and palace security flooded in. Led by Margaret Finch, she looked shocked and horrified, which Thomas knew was an act. "There he is," she shouted. "Stop him. He has a weapon." Guards rushed toward Thomas, shouting commands. He tried to explain, tried to tell them it was a setup, but the drugs in his system made his words slurred and incomprehensible. They grabbed him, forcing him face down on the floor, yanking his arms behind his back. "Check on Her Royal Highness," someone shouted. There was a flurry of activity around Catherine's chair. Thomas could hear people calling for medical assistance for the prince, for emergency protocols to be initiated. "Is she alive?" Another voice asked urgently. "Yes, but barely. She has been drugged. Someone call an ambulance." Relief flooded through Thomas despite his desperate situation. Catherine was alive. Whatever Margaret had planned, she had not succeeded in killing Catherine yet. There was still a chance to stop this. But then Margaret was kneeling beside him, her face close to his ear so only he could hear. "This is just a delay," she whispered. "She will die in the hospital. An unexpected complication from the drugs you gave her. And you will spend the rest of your life in prison for attempted murder. Game over, Thomas." As he was dragged from the room, Thomas tried desperately to clear his head, to think of some way out of this nightmare. But the drugs were too strong, the situation too dire. He had failed. He had tried to save Catherine, and instead, he had become the weapon used against her. The last thing he saw before they took him from the bedroom was Prince William arriving, his face a mask of shock and fury as he looked at the scene before him. And Thomas knew that no explanation, no evidence, would matter now. He looked guilty, and in the eyes of everyone present, guilty was exactly what he was. Thomas sat in the cold interrogation room, his hands cuffed to a metal table, his head pounding from whatever drug Margaret had used on him. The room was deliberately uncomfortable, with harsh fluorescent lighting and bare walls painted institutional gray. He had been here for 6 hours, questioned repeatedly by police detectives who clearly believed he was guilty. "Let me get this straight," Detective Chief Inspector Robert Hayes said, leaning back in his chair across from Thomas. "You expect us to believe that Margaret Finch, a woman who has served the royal family faithfully for 20 years, is actually a foreign agent trying to assassinate Princess Catherine, and that she drugged you and framed you for attempted murder?" "Yes," Thomas said, his voice hoarse from talking. "That is exactly what happened. And if you do not listen to me, Catherine is going to die in that hospital. Margaret said she had people there, that they would make it look like complications from the drugs I supposedly gave her." "The drugs you did give her," another detective, a woman named Sarah Chen, corrected. "Your fingerprints were all over the medication bottle found in your possession. Your DNA was on the syringe we found in the bedroom. Witnesses say you have been behaving strangely around the princess for days, meeting with her secretly." "I was helping her investigate," Thomas insisted. "She came to me because she was being poisoned and did not know who to trust. I had the medication analyzed by a forensic toxicologist. His report will prove that the pills contained arsenic. We have already spoken to James Rothwell, Detective Hayes said. He claims he has no idea what you are talking about. Says he never analyzed any medication for you. Thomas felt the ground drop out from under him. That is not possible. He called me yesterday with the results. He said he found arsenic and sedatives. His laboratory has no record of any such analysis, Sarah Chen said. And he has provided us with his phone records showing no calls to you in the past week. Whatever you think happened, guard Bennett, it did not. Thomas closed his eyes, understanding dawning. Margaret had gotten to James, either threatened him or paid him or worse. Everything Thomas had thought was evidence was disappearing, just as Margaret had promised it would. What about the documents? Thomas demanded. The ones showing Margaret's communications with foreign intelligence services? Catherine photographed them on her phone. We examined Princess Catherine's phone, Detective Hayes said. There are no such photographs. In fact, there is nothing suspicious on her phone at all. Just normal messages to family and friends. Then Margaret deleted them, Thomas said desperately. She had access to Catherine's phone. She had access to everything. The two detectives exchanged a look that Thomas had seen before. It was the look people gave someone they thought was delusional, mentally unstable. They did not believe a word he was saying. Here is what we think happened, Sarah Chen said, her voice taking on a gentler tone. You are a decorated military veteran who has experienced combat trauma. You took a position at the palace, hoping for stability and peace. But being around the royal family, seeing them up close, something shifted in your mind. You became fixated on Princess Catherine. You started imagining that she needed saving, that there was some grand conspiracy, and eventually, that delusion led you to act. That is not what happened, Thomas said. But even he could hear how weak his protest sounded. We found a journal in your apartment, Detective Hayes continued. Detailed notes about Princess Catherine's daily routines, her schedule, where she would be at certain times. You have been stalking her, Guard Bennett. And when that was not enough, you decided to create a crisis where you could be her hero. Only it went wrong. She nearly died. That is insane, Thomas said. Why would I do that? You tell us, Sarah Chen replied. But what we know for certain is this. Princess Catherine was found unconscious in her bedroom, drugged with a powerful sedative. You were found in that same bedroom, also drugged, with a weapon and the medication used to poison her. Your fingerprints, your DNA, your documented access to her private areas, the evidence is overwhelming. Thomas slumped in his chair, the full weight of Margaret's plan becoming clear. She had thought of everything, covered every angle. She had turned his attempt to help Catherine into proof of his guilt. And there was no way out because every piece of evidence that could have exonerated him had been erased or turned against him. I want to see Catherine, he said. Let me talk to her. She will tell you the truth. Princess Catherine is in the hospital, Detective Hayes said. She is still unconscious and in critical condition. Even if she wakes up, she will likely have no memory of what happened due to the drugs in her system. But you can be sure that when she does wake up and learns what you tried to do, she will confirm what we already know, that you were a threat to her safety. They left him alone in the interrogation room after that. Thomas put his head down on the cold metal table, feeling the last bit of hope drain away. He had failed Catherine, failed to save her, failed to expose the conspiracy. And now he was going to prison for a crime he did not commit while the real murderer walked free to try again. Hours passed. Thomas lost track of time in that windowless room. He dozed fitfully, exhaustion finally overtaking his racing thoughts. When the door finally opened again, he expected more detectives, more accusations. Instead, Prince William walked in. Thomas straightened immediately, shock rendering him speechless. The prince looked terrible, his eyes red-rimmed with dark circles beneath them, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. He sat down across from Thomas, and for a long moment, they just stared at each other. My wife is dying, Prince William said finally, his voice raw. The doctors say, even if she survives the next 24 hours, there may be permanent damage. Brain damage from lack of oxygen? She might never be the same. I did not do this, Thomas said, meeting his eyes. Your Royal Highness, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I was trying to save her, not hurt her. That is what Margaret says you would claim, William replied. She says you are delusional, that you constructed an entire fantasy about conspiracies and foreign agents to justify your obsession. Margaret is the one behind this, Thomas said urgently. She is the one who has been poisoning your wife for months. Catherine knew. She came to me for help because she did not know who else to trust. She was afraid. Afraid of what? William demanded. My wife has the best security in the world. She is surrounded by people who would die to protect her. Why would she turn to a palace guard she barely knows instead of coming to me, her husband? The question hung in the air, and Thomas hesitated before answering. But there was nothing left to lose now, so he told the truth. Because she was not sure if she could trust you. She was afraid you might be involved, or that you would not believe her. Your Royal Highness, she has been living in terror for months, and no one noticed. No one helped her, until it was almost too late. William's face went through a series of expressions: anger, denial, pain, and finally something that looked like doubt. Tell me everything, he said quietly. Every conversation you had with her, every piece of evidence you think you found. I will decide if I believe you, so Thomas told him. Starting from that first morning when Catherine collapsed in the corridor, through all their secret meetings, the medication analysis, the documents she found in Margaret's office, he left nothing out, even though he knew how implausible it all sounded without proof. When he finished, William sat in silence for several minutes. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. This is Prince William. I need you to bring me all of Margaret Finch's communication records for the past year. Phone, email, everything. And I need Palace IT to check Princess Catherine's phone for recently deleted files. Do it quietly, and do not tell Margaret about it. He paused, listening. I do not care what the protocol is. This is a direct order. Do it now. He hung up and looked at Thomas. I am not saying I believe you. But Catherine did try to talk to me several weeks ago about feeling unwell, about suspecting her medication was wrong. I dismissed her concerns. I told her to trust the doctors. If I was wrong, if I failed to protect her because I would not listen, then I need to know. You can start by checking the hospital, Thomas said. Margaret told me she has people there. If Catherine shows any signs of recovering, they're going to make sure she does not survive. William's face hardened. If that is true, if anyone tries to hurt my wife again, I will personally ensure they face justice. He stood up. You stay here. I am going to the hospital, and I am going to make some calls. People I know I can trust. If what you are saying is true, if there really is a conspiracy, we are going to expose it. But if you are lying to me, if you actually did try to hurt Catherine, I will make sure you never see daylight again. After William left, Thomas was returned to a holding cell. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. He had no way of knowing what was happening at the hospital, whether Catherine was getting better or worse, whether William had found any evidence to support his claims. All he could do was wait and hope that his gamble in trusting the prince would pay off. It was late evening when Detective Hayes came to the cell. You are being released, he said, his expression unreadable. Someone very important has vouched for you. But do not think this is over. We will be investigating your claims thoroughly. Thomas was taken back to the interrogation room, where his personal effects were returned to him. As he was signing the release papers, the door opened and David Martinez walked in, looking relieved. Thank God, David said. I was about to storm this place myself. When you did not contact me, I checked your phone records like you asked. I found the message you sent yourself, the voice memo with all the evidence. I took it straight to Prince William. Thomas felt tears prick his eyes. You believed me? I've known you for 5 years, David said. You are a lot of things, but obsessed stalker is not one of them. Something about this whole situation felt wrong from the start. I just needed to figure out what. They left the police station together, and David drove Thomas to the hospital where Catherine was being treated. The route was circuitous, designed to avoid media attention. When they arrived, they were taken through a private entrance to a secure floor. Prince William was waiting in a private room, and this time, Catherine was there too. She was in a hospital bed, pale and weak but awake. An IV was attached to her arm, and monitors beeped softly in the background. When she saw Thomas, tears began streaming down her face. "I am so sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They told me what happened. What Margaret did to you? This is all my fault," Thomas said, moving closer to the bed. "None of this is your fault. You were right about everything. You were incredibly brave." William stepped forward. "I owe you an apology, Guard Bennett. A massive one. While you were being held, I had my personal security team investigate Margaret Finch. We found everything. Her offshore bank accounts, her communications with foreign contacts, evidence of the payments she had been making to Palace staff to help her. Even footage of her entering Catherine's room the night before you were arrested, placing the knife, and staging the scene." "Where is she now?" Thomas asked. "In custody," William said grimly, along with 3 other staff members who were working with her. MI5 is involved now, and they are tracing her foreign connections. This goes deeper than we imagined. There are people in government, in media, all working to destabilize the monarchy. Margaret was just one piece of a larger operation. Catherine reached out and took Thomas's hand. "You saved my life. If you had not believed me, if you had not been brave enough to help me, I would be dead right now, and Margaret would have gotten away with it." "What happens now?" Thomas asked. "Now we rebuild," William said. "We root out everyone involved in this conspiracy. We strengthen our security protocols, and we make sure this never happens again." He paused. "And we offer you a position, if you want it. Head of personal security for the Princess of Wales. Someone we know we can trust absolutely." Thomas looked at Catherine, then at William, then at David, who was grinning in the doorway. A week ago, he had been a simple palace guard, invisible and unimportant. Now he had uncovered a plot against the crown, saved the life of the future queen, and been offered one of the most important security positions in the country. "I accept," he said. "On one condition. We stop pretending that the royal family is untouchable. We acknowledge that bad things can happen, even in the most protected places. And we listen when people tell us something is wrong, no matter how impossible it seems." "Agreed," Catherine said softly. "No more secrets. No more dismissing concerns. We do better." Over the following weeks, the full scope of Margaret's conspiracy was revealed to a shocked nation. She had been part of a network spanning multiple countries, all working to undermine the British monarchy through scandal, violence, and political manipulation. The arrests were extensive, reaching into parliament, media organizations, and even other royal households across Europe. Catherine recovered slowly but surely, the arsenic gradually leaving her system. She gave a televised address, explaining what had happened. Her voice steady and clear as she detailed the conspiracy and thanked the people who had saved her life, particularly mentioning Thomas by name. The public response was overwhelming. Support for the royal family actually increased. As people rallied around Catherine and admired her courage in speaking about her ordeal, the attempted assassination became a turning point, leading to reforms in how the palace handled security and internal investigations. James Rothwell, who had been threatened by Margaret's associates into denying his analysis, came forward with the truth once Margaret was arrested. His testimony, along with recovered evidence, helped secure convictions against everyone involved in the plot. 6 months after that terrifying morning when Catherine had collapsed in the corridor, Thomas stood at his new post as head of personal security, watching as she gave a speech at a children's hospital. She was healthy now, vibrant and strong, showing no signs of the months of poisoning she had endured. Her husband stood beside her. Thomas could see the way William watched her with a mixture of love and protective vigilance that had not been there before. Catherine caught Thomas's eye and gave him a small smile, a private acknowledgement of everything they had been through together. He nodded back, a silent promise that he would always be vigilant, always be ready to act when something seemed wrong. Because he had learned the most important lesson of all: the greatest dangers often come from the places we least expect, from the people we trust most. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to believe the impossible and trust your instincts, even when the whole world tells you that you are wrong. As Catherine finished her speech to thunderous applause, Thomas scanned the crowd with professional precision. There would be no more conspiracies on his watch. No more plots that went undetected. He had been given a second chance to protect someone important, and he would not waste it. The princess, who had crumpled in the palace corridor, was standing tall now, stronger than ever. And the guard who had caught her had stumbled upon a terrifying royal secret that had nearly destroyed them both. But they had survived. They had won. And in the end, the truth had come out. Just as it always does when brave people refuse to look away from evil, no matter how powerful it appears to be. The terror was over. The healing had begun. And in one of the oldest monarchies in the world, things would never be quite the same again. But perhaps, Thomas thought, as he watched Catherine laugh with the children at the hospital, that was exactly how it should be. Change, even painful change, sometimes leads to something better than what came before. And as the security team escorted the royal couple back to their car, Thomas walked beside them, no longer invisible. No longer just a guard in the background. He was a trusted protector, a friend, and proof that sometimes the most unlikely people become heroes when the moment demands it. The palace had many secrets, but this one, at least, had been brought into the light. And in that light, Catherine and William and Thomas could finally move forward, scarred but stronger, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring.